The Watership Down podcast is intended for listeners who are familiar with the plot. There will be spoilers. This episode is scripted by Newell Fisher and Giacomo Luca. It is recorded, edited and narrated by Newell Fisher. Hello, and welcome to the Watership Down podcast episode 135, in which we'll be looking at Season 1, Episode 13 of the TV series, and Episode 13 of the series overall. The last episode of Season 1, Kidnapped. But first, can I just remind you that the Watership Down graphic novel is available in the UK from October 19th. Other countries may vary. I'm very excited by this book, the latest visual version of the original novel since the 2018 Netflix series, and from what I've seen it looks very good. I know that the illustrator, Joe Sutphin, has based his work on intimate research of the actual landscape that the book is set in, and it looks excellent from the pages that have been released in advance. For full disclosure, I have paid for my pre-ordered hardback copy in full. There will be details in the notes. I've had a message from a listener called Giacomo Luca, which gives an interesting spin to a comment I made in episode 83 at 2 minutes, which I followed up in episode 84 at 50 seconds. Quote, "Dear Watership Down podcast, my greetings and appreciation for this podcast, a truly amazing endeavour. I recently became a listener after developing a fascination for the world and characters of the book, having first watched the BBC adaptation and then listening to the audiobook. I was delighted to find out in your podcast that there is actually a Tales of Watership Down sequel. I'm currently listening to each tale and corresponding podcast episode one at a time. So far I got it until the rabbit ghost story. The reason I'm writing to you is to hopefully provide some additional insight into the soundtrack of the 78 movie. I've not watched the Watership Down movie yet, but I did listen to the soundtrack, and I happen to have read a paragraph about its author and some background information in a book. This is actually what got me to read the novel in the first place. In your episode 84, you speculate about a nexus between a track in the movie and the Imperial March in Star Wars. This is no coincidence. The main author of the Watership Down soundtrack is Angela Morley, who was a long-time contributor to John Williams, hence the reason why several tracks show elements that are sometimes conspicuously similar in style and realisation to other John Williams compositions. Not that I think that this is inappropriate, as I like the Watership Down soundtrack a lot. An interesting anecdote regarding the Watership Down film is that Morley apparently had to rapidly take over the task of creating the music for the film after the originally contracted author failed to produce almost any music at all. A form of musician's block, I suppose. Anyway, I think Ms. Morley quite succeeded in the task, despite the short time at her disposal, and got me to read Watership Down as a result. Best regards, Giacomo." End quote. We have touched on Angela Morley's involvement in the music of the 1978 film before, in particular in episodes 58 and 120. However, your perspective that the phrase I picked up in track 13 of the soundtrack, "Escape from Efrafa" at 1 minute 40, could indeed be linked to Star Wars is interesting, especially as it is one that may have appeared in Watership Down first and then in Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. In other words, the reverse of what I speculated on in episode 83, due to making the classic error of thinking the Imperial March appeared in episode 4, A New Hope, and may have then inspired the phrase in Watership Down. It may have been the other way round. Darth Woundwort indeed. Thank you, Giacomo. I really recommend the 1978 film to you, and welcome to the Owsler. I'm still showcasing Watership Down themed art. Again, details in the notes. Please let me know if you would like your Watership Down themed art to appear as the podcast title image for an episode, with full credit given. It was especially pleasing to feature a specially created image last week. Anyway, it's time for a game of bluff and double bluff in the rain, and an unfortunate event. Season 1, Episode 13, Kidnapped. The 13th episode of the Watership Down TV series was first broadcast in the UK on the 21st of December 1999. It was written by Mary Crawford and Alan Templeton. There will be a link to the full episode on YouTube in the notes. This episode is interesting, coming as it does in the immediate wake of Campion's encounter with Hazel, as a result of which he definitely lied to Vervain, a fellow Efrafa Owsler officer, as to whether Hazel had been in the greenhouse. Does he do this as part of sticking to the truce they called in order to escape? In this episode, the last of Season 1, we will find out. And the tone of the story is definitely a little darker in character than we have been used to. As the action opens, it is raining, as it is almost throughout this episode. Given the involvement of Efrafa, is this a homage to the escape from Efrafa in the novel? Two blackbirds watch the Efrafan patrol pass from a tree in an echo of the parrots of the last episode. Kihar buzzes the patrol, hurling abuse at them, and Vervain has to admit after a suggestion from Moss that following him to find the outsider's warren would be no good. The gull is too sly, another term for intelligence when possessed by an enemy. Vervain now knows Kihar is no dumb gull. A grey rabbit called Larch collapses from exhaustion at the back of the patrol. Vervain orders him left behind. Birds circle Larch overhead, and we will not see him again. This is one of the underplayed apparent deaths of this series. On Watership Down, a wet Kihar reports to Hazel that there are Efrafan patrols everywhere. Fiver asks what Woundwort will do if he finds their warren. Bigwig says he will attack them with as much force as possible, and they are not strong enough to fight the Efrafans. Rabbit kittens play around them as a reminder that this cannot happen. Hazel says they need to take more direct action. They need to attack Efrafa from within by finding someone willing to overthrow Woundwort. Campion isn't happy about what has happened in Efrafa, Hazel says, but Bigwig scoffs at the idea of an Owsler captain being willing to betray his chief. Hazel asks if he would in Campion's position. He admits he might have to. In Efrafa, Campion is helping to supervise a miserable Silflay in the rain. It is obvious he is not happy. On the down, Hazel leads out a patrol, heading for Efrafa. They head underground towards the secret river. In Efrafa, Campion is arguing that the rabbits need more time above ground to feed and need to be allowed to look further for food. They are growing weak. Woundwort responds that they have enough. If they are weak, that means they are less likely to escape. The rank and file in Efrafa are little more than an inconvenience to be kept under control. Campion also says that the Owsler are exhausted looking for the outsiders. Good Owsler members are being lost. Woundwort's response is that they need to find Hazel, Fiver and Bigwig. Then it will all stop. The Watership Down patrol has reached the secret river. Before heading above ground, Primrose has a conversation with Hazel about how much she dreads being taken back to Efrafa. At Bigwig's command, they swim down the secret river towards the test. Bigwig first, then a hesitant Pipkin, followed by Fiver, Primrose and Hazel. Our view of the entrance to the river has changed a lot from 2 episodes ago, when it seemed to lie in a channel leading to the test. Now it lies right by the test, and the ruined stone bridge is close by. I've posted images showing this change on Instagram. This is a good example of the more flexible reality of this kind of animation compared to the attempt to represent the natural world accurately of the 1978 film. Put simply, we are moving a little closer to Disney. They arrive at an old log that seemed to be on the other side of the stream last time we were here. Kihar joins them, and they make their way to the stone bridge, which they shelter under from the rain. The plan is to wait for Campion to come across the bridge. Sure enough, a short time later Campion arrives with a patrol, though not with Vervain this time. He gives his troops a little pep talk, and then, just as they make their way across the river, Kihar buzzes them, scaring 2 into the river with the other 2 running away. Campion remains behind. Did he know Kihar wouldn't target him? He seemed to. At this point I'm going with the working assumption that he lied about Hazel in the last episode out of loyalty to their truce, but he is still loyal to Efrafa. His screams after the rabbits who ran away seemed genuine enough. Kihar buzzes Campion one more time, causing him to turn around. And there is Primrose. Campion runs to her happily, saying she has come back. It is obvious he is besotted with her, but she just looks away. The next moment, Bigwig and Hazel are on him. They restrain the furious Campion, and Hazel says they just want to talk. As they make their way to cover, Primrose has a sad moment to herself. What is she thinking? It is subtle moments like this that make this a better class of children's animation. As the torrential rain continues, Hazel asks Campion for his word he will hear them out. Campion says he will, Unlike Bigwig, his word means something. Pipkin is confused, so Bigwig explains this is about his spying on Efrafa. Campion says his Owlsler will be looking for him. Hazel gets to the point. The war between the two Warrens is hurting everyone and has to stop. Campion responds that it will when they are destroyed. Primrose plays her role perfectly by saying that Woundwort preaches hate and violence. She knows Campion doesn't believe in him. Campion says he is his chief. Primrose responds that he has risked his life to prevent Woundwort's cruelty. He saved her life. Campion responds that she then left Efrafa. She says that was because life in Efrafa wasn't worth living. She asks him to help them, and by doing so, help Efrafa. Campion asks how. Hazel is direct. Campion should lead the Owlsler against Woundwort, take command, and save his people. After a pause, he says they will meet him again at sunset for his answer. Hazel obviously already trusts Campion to not betray them at that meeting, as he now has a chance to ambush them with his Owlsler. As they all leave Campion, he sadly asks Primrose if she is happy where she is now. She says she is, then leaves. The thunder has started. On the other side of the river, another wide patrol approaches, led by Vervain. He sees the outsiders leave undergrowth on the other side of the river, and then Campion as well, going in the opposite direction. He orders his patrol to take cover, then waits until Campion crosses the bridge. Then he leads his patrol in pursuit of the outsiders. Kihar spots the Efrafans and warns his comrades, who make a run for it. Bigwig says to avoid the sand, to avoid leaving tracks. They dart behind the covered entrance to the secret river, just as the Efrafans arrive, of course. Furiously, Vervain orders a search, but the rain has washed away any scent or tracks, Moss reports. Vervain decides to focus on Campion instead of continuing the search. Underground, by the secret river, the rabbits of Watership Down wonder if Campion will throw in with them. Bigwig points out how hard it is to betray your chief. Ominously, Hazel says if he saw them with Campion, he may not get the chance. In our modern world, it can be hard to remember just how important blind loyalty has been for much of human history, because, let's just have a reality check here for a second, this is not set in actual rabbit society, it is set in human society. And for most of the history and prehistory of our species, the only ideology has been loyalty to a clan or chief. Campion is faced with nothing less than the greatest act of moral realignment that is possible in such a culture. Having said that, Hazel's leadership, when compared to Woundwort's, does exemplify some clear principles of animality as set out to Woundwort by Strawberry in chapter 27 of the novel. And for a moral agent such as the rabbits of the Lapine world invented by Richard Adams, such considerations cannot be ignored. Campion, along with whatever is going on in his mind, arrives alone back at Efrafa. As he does so, he notices miserable rank-and-file Efrafans at Silfley. He is met by Moss, who seems less friendly towards him and says from atop a platform that Woundwort is waiting for his report. They both enter the Warren proper via this platform, encountering another space with a platform, thus confirming that these platforms are dual in nature. One outside for Woundwort to address the entire Warren, and an inner sanctum in which Owlsler business is conducted. This was not clear before. Inevitably, Vervain is present in this inner chamber, and Campion is surrounded by Owlsler as he reports that he has been touring the perimeter and thinking. Dangerous words in Efrafa. Woundwort asks Vervain to repeat what he told him. Vervain says that Campion met with the outsiders, and there was no attempt to fight or recapture them. He slithers around Campion as he challenges him to deny this. Campion says he denies nothing. The outsiders asked him to betray Efrafa. Vervain does an involuntary dance for joy around Campion as he squeals his pleasure at this confession. Campion continues that he let them believe he would betray Efrafa. Once he gains their trust, they will lead him to their warren. Then they will destroy them all. Vervain's joy is interrupted. Could this be true? Has everything we saw Campion say to Hazel been a lie, as well as his conversations with Primrose? For now, this does seem credible. Woundwort laughs the laugh of the despot. He says Campion is a rabbit after his own heart. They will grind their bones. More laughter. Either Campion is a true double agent at this point, or he has truly served his chief. We cannot be certain yet. By the secret river, Bigwig and Fiver are playing bobstones. Nearby, Hazel wanders to Primrose at Frith, creating such beauty as this cave, and then hiding it away under the world. Primrose says he does this with creatures too, like Campion. On the outside he is hard and cold, but underneath he is a bit like Hazel. Hazel replies that Frith creates them, but they make themselves who they are. In doing so, he sums up one of the fundamental conflicts of the Judeo-Christian tradition. Is our fundamental nature dictated by deity, or are we able to control and change it? To expand on this further would make this a podcast on philosophy and religion, so I won't. Pipkin arrives back via the secret river and reports that it is still raining. Hazel says it is time to get to the meeting place. Pipkin and Primrose are to stay behind. Primrose asks what if this is a trap. Hazel replies that is why she is not coming. Pipkin reassures Primrose that the rabbits going to meet Campion, Hazel, Bigwig and Fiver, the leader, warrior and a mystic, are the smartest rabbits in the world, apart from LRR. Kiha has tried to scout out the woods, but it is difficult to tell if any Efrafa are hiding in these conditions. Hazel says they will just have to risk it. He tells Kiha to stay close, but out of sight. In the undergrowth, Campion waits. Hazel, Fiver and Bigwig arrive and approach him. Hazel asks him what his decision is. Campion responds that he has decided that Hazel is right. There is no reason for their warrants to fight. Just as Bigwig is saying he is impressed, Vervain arrives with a patrol and surrounds them. What is going on here? Woundwort clearly approved Campion infiltrating the Watership Down warrant, and yet Vervain has showed up in force to credibly falsify Campion's attempt to do so. Is this Vervain's ego overriding any semblance of tactical awareness on his part yet again, or is something else going on here? An angry Bigwig declares that Campion will die before him. Campion says he knew nothing of this ambush. If they fall, they will do so together. With unfettered joy, Vervain says he knew Campion was a traitor. He orders the Efrafa Alza to attack. The 8 rabbits of Efrafa close in on the 3 of Watership Down and Campion. After another obvious ad break, Campion says to his apparent new comrades to follow him when he moves. Bigwig understandably says he isn't sure he trusts Campion anymore. Hazel says they have nothing to lose. In a sequence, the logic of which is unclear, the 4 surrounded rabbits break free of the 8 surrounding them in a 1/3 spread. In doing so, Campion, who is already clear of the encircling Efrafans, knocks Vervain over, despite having clearly made a run for it at a 90-degree angle from him in the previous shot. In any case, the Watership Down rabbits leave in one direction, and Vervain, knocked to the ground, orders his troops to tear them up. So, was this ambush by Vervain a subtle ruse in order to convince the rabbits of Watership Down that Campion was actually on their side? Or was it an inept attempt by Vervain to catch Campion in the act of betrayal? My initial reaction was the first, but Vervain does seem to go a bit heavy-handed for an ambush that is intended to fail. So, on this occasion, I'm going to say with confidence that I am not overthinking this. If Vervain acted under orders, he went far too far, and in doing so became himself a traitor to Efrafa by failing to follow his chief's orders. As the escapees run away, Campion points out that their pursuers are exhausted. We see several Efrafan pursuers fall in the river. Campion, still running, says that once they have lost the Efrafans, they will need somewhere to hide. The voices are unclear, but I think it is Hazel who suggests the cavern, only for Bigwig to say they need to find somewhere else. He is not yet ready to trust Campion with their biggest secret. They divert away from the river. By the secret river, Primrose is worried that they should be back by now. Pipkin says he will go and look, but the water is now deeper than he expected, and he is swept away towards the cave entrance. Primrose goes in after him, but it is too late, as Pipkin enters the river and is gone. The Efrafans fan out in a field of cows in an attempt to find the outsiders, who are hiding by a cattle trough among the cows. Bigwig is suspicious. He thinks they have lost their pursuers a little too easily. Campion comes clean and says it was supposed to be harder. The ambush was planned to make them think he is on their side now. Bigwig presses him further, but Campion points out that he wouldn't be saying this if he wasn't. He is expected to find out where their warren is and report back to Woundwort. He says he hates this, that he doesn't know who he is anymore. He looks utterly defeated. If Campion is genuine, he is going through a complete crisis of identity. Hazel, Bigwig and Fiver withdraw to discuss whether Campion is genuine. They simply don't know. Fiver says lies are un-rabbit-like and confusing, and for such social creatures I guess they would be. And then they hear Primrose crying out for Pipkin. They find her by the river looking for him. She cannot find any tracks indicating he got out of the river. Campion reassures her they will find him, at which point Primrose loses her temper, saying that if there were no Efrafa, he would still be with them. Campion apologises. Kihar arrives, and Hazel tells Fiver to go with him and Primrose. Bigwig suggests to Hazel that they kill Campion to be on the safe side. He seems to be acting more out of anger than logic. Campion says he understands why they don't trust him. He is going back to Efrafa. He will say they saw through his ploy. Hazel says he is mad. They will never believe him. Campion says it has to look like he fought for the honour of Efrafa. Campion looks at Bigwig. He understands and tells Hazel to go and look for Pipkin. Bigwig says he will make it quick. Further off, the others cannot see any trace of Pipkin. Bigwig arrives to say Campion has gone back to Efrafa. They keep looking for Pipkin. In Efrafa, Woundwort welcomes their new guest, captured by Vervain, Pipkin, who says he won't tell them anything, so they might as well kill him. Woundwort asks what kind of stories he has heard about him. He would never do that. He orders Pipkin to be shown to the best quarters in Efrafa and to be given flayrah from his private store. Once Pipkin is gone, he smiles that he will have him thinking he is his uncle before long. Moss reports that Campion has returned. He is in his quarters and looks like he is in the same state as after the hawk got him. He says the outsiders didn't believe him. He had to fight his way out. Woundwort is indifferent. Lifting Campion's head to inspect his wounds, he says he wouldn't have believed him either. But he has a new game to play now. Campion, now almost definitely a rabbit of Watership Down, sits up as Woundwort leaves. He looks world-weary. It is night. The rain has stopped. Near the bridge, the Watership Down rabbits hear Vervain shout out for them. He says he knows they are out there. General Woundwort has a message for them. Hazel, Bigwig and Fiver have until the moon is round to surrender, or they will never see Pipkin alive again. Hazel, in shock, looks at the crescent moon. And Season 1 ends. Is it canon? Of course not. But this episode is an effective bit of storytelling and crucial to the narrative that the TV series brought to the Watership Down universe. This is also the last Watership Down-based storytelling of the 20th century, the century in which Richard Adams was born and in which he wrote the novel that began it all. Next time, having reached the end of Season 1 of the 1999 TV series, we pause for one episode to look at Efrafa.